So WHO defines adolescents as young individuals between the age bracket of 10 to 19. And teenage, which is a less well-defined terms, is the age group between 13 to 19. Now, this is a very sensitive age. Mobile phone usage in India across rural urban has reached 97%, and it's increasing. Mobile phone ownership in India is around 73%, and even in states like Odisha, for example, if you see, there are 83% mobile phone owners.
Depression, which was earlier more of a midlife crisis that people experienced in their mid-age group, 30s and 40s, is now being more experienced by this age group, which is the teenagers and the pre-teenagers.
Now, the other aspect of that which is reported is the risk of cyberbullying. So various reports are there which suggest that 37% of Indian adolescents have faced cyberbullying. The National Crime Records Bureau data again presents a very disturbing fact where in around 35% of cases of suicide among adults, the use of social media has been seen as a culprit.
Hello and welcome to the Perspectives brought to you by Vision Eyes. Today we turn our attention to a generation which is being shaped by the digital world. It won't be wrong to say India's teens are growing up online. According to a report, nearly 500 million accounts, social media accounts, were created in the past few years. And nearly 90% teens in cities and 65% teens in villages stay online at least once every day. Now let's try to understand whether this is a matter of concern or whether it has a brighter side. To discuss the same, today we have with us two eminent faculty members of Vision IS, Anjani sir and Geetika ma'am, who are going to shed light upon this growing or pressing concern relating to Indian teenagers and social media. So let's begin this conversation with the first question for you. How pressing is this issue?
So, Charanjit, this definitely is an important issue. We have anecdotal evidence. For example, in our conversations, we see how children, their attention spans, their ability to learn, everything is being shaped by the penetration of digital medium in our lives. And if you have to establish this, first of all, we need to focus on a few words here. When we say social media, by that we mean those internet-based platforms which rely on individual users creating profiles, these users then sharing the content generated by the users themselves, and then it means that it is promoting the functions of engagement, connection, which are very important human needs. But this is something new to our experience. So for example, if you go back in history, something like a Facebook was launched in 2004, and 2006 onwards, it was open to anyone who was 13 years and above. Similarly, YouTube in 2005 and Instagram, these are some of the important social media platforms. Instagram started in 2010. So if we look at the second word there, which is adolescents or teenage. So WHO defines adolescents as young individuals between the age bracket of 10 to 19. And teenage, which is a less well-defined terms, is the age group between 13 to 19. Now, this is a very sensitive age. This is a transformational age, transitional age. These are people who are becoming adults, who are in the process of becoming adults. So where do they learn from? Who do they engage with? Is a very important input into their development. Now let's come to the broader aspect of this issue. We have heard about demographic dividend that India has potentially on the basis of a young age population that we have. And secondly, if we see, there is a push towards digitalization all around. So for example, if you see a paper of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology 2019, it talked about India's potential of $1 trillion digital economy. Then the date was 2025. Now most of the estimates say by 2030 we would be a digital economy. So it's very clear that digitalization is happening. Social media is a reality, and it's a reality of a very young, vulnerable, sensitive age group in our country. Now let's add some numbers to it. What is going to drive this? So if you look at the NSS survey, the comprehensive modular survey on telecom, 80th round, it tells you the data very clearly that mobile phone usage in India across rural urban has reached 97%, and it's increasing. Mobile phone ownership in India is around 73%, and even in states like Odisha, for example, if you see, there are 83% mobile phone owners. So this mobile phone penetration is increasing, and it is becoming a primary medium through which people engage and consume content or use social media. So on the one hand, if you look at this is a very good number as far as digital inclusion is concerned. If digital inclusion, by digital inclusion, we mean how many people are connected. But on the second hand, if you see, the same survey also tells you that the usage of the online medium, particularly social media, is more social and transactional, sending messages or consuming content rather than productive or transformative. So this is one challenge. How do we make it productive and transformative since social media usage is there? And the second area where the debate is moving now is from the digital, addressing the digital divide, data and privacy rights, to how do we prevent the negative impact of social media or digital tools on vulnerable population, and children are among them. So you would see, for example, these kinds of data is being talked about, that 95% of US teenage population, adolescent population is YouTube user. 60% or more say that quitting YouTube would be difficult. If you look at in India, there are various reports which suggest from 66% to 90% of parents complaining that our children have become addicted to social media. And solutions are also being thought about. So we have the case of Australia, which made news last year, whereby an age restriction has been put in place, where for anyone to have an account on social media, you have to be 16 years or above. And the second thing is, the onus of enforcement, rather than being on individual, the idea is that it should be on the platforms, on the companies. They are more powerful. So if they fail to ensure compliance to this regulation in Australia, whereby you need to be 16 years and above to have an account, there is a provision that they would be penalized to the tune of 50 million Australian US dollars. And then there is European Union, which the Digital Services Act, which is again trying to prevent the manipulation, the nudge, or the tracking, undue tracking of children or vulnerable population through online platforms. So this is another aspect of the debate, that digital technology is important, but those who wield digital technology are working in a framework which primarily focuses on profits. The more the number of users, the more profit there is. But the social responsibility, especially in the case of vulnerable section of population, is something that we all need to think about. So this is the broader aspect of the debate that we can start with.
Thank you so much, sir, for this comprehensive analysis. Now, ma'am, the question is for you. Because we're talking about a very sensitive age group, and as sir said, there are numerous regulations across the world. But do we really have concrete evidence, scientific facts to support these claims that social media is taking a toll on the mental health of adolescents or children?
Yes, Chiranjit. Well, first let's understand social media. If I have to give you an analogy, I could safely say that it's like fire. When you use it correctly, right, and wisely, it gives you warmth and light. But at the same time, when you're using it carelessly, it can do harm. Now, in that context, we have to understand that there is a certain correlation that we have observed and research has observed between increasing usage of social media and decreasing levels of life satisfaction that people have reported. In fact, the numbers have been more pronounced in the age group of adolescents, especially boys in the age group of 14 to 16 and girls in the age of 11 to 13. In fact, the other day I was reading an article in The Economist and it talked about that depression, which was earlier more of a midlife crisis that people experienced in their mid-age group, 30s and 40s, is now being more experienced by this age group, which is the teenagers and the pre-teenagers. So yes, there is definitely a correlation, but does it prove causation, is something that we are still trying to understand. And there was a study in 2018 by the Stanford University in which they asked certain people to stay away from social media for a month, especially Facebook, and the detoxies, as they called them. They reported being more happier and less politically polarized after 1 month. So the research is still ongoing, but there is clearly a link that has been established, and we cannot overlook the fact that social media is now a part of our daily lives and it is an integral part of the teenagers' diet.
Right, very correctly mentioned. So would you like to add to what ma'am said?
So, very correctly put, we are starting to understand the impact of use of social media or constant digital connectivity, especially on young minds. As I had earlier mentioned, that this is a transitional age. Now, these are the young people who are in the process of becoming fully formed adults. So, if you see, for example, the influences which come from social media may be pernicious. They may be beneficial also, we'll discuss that later, but may be pernicious. So for example, this is very well captured by a series on one of the popular OTTs which became widely circulated over the last year, Adolescents, which is based in UK. Now, the other aspect of that which is reported is the risk of cyberbullying. So various reports are there which suggest that 37% of Indian adolescents have faced cyberbullying. The National Crime Records Bureau data again presents a very disturbing fact where in around 35% of cases of suicide among adults, the use of social media has been seen as a culprit. Similarly, if you see, the general patterns which are emerging is a comparison-based lifestyle, where what is presented online is a carefully curated, perfect lifestyle, perfect looks, perfect marks, perfect everything, and perfection doesn't exist in real life. So that is basically changing the perception of the young adults. There is peer pressure, there is cyberbullying, and all these certainly point out towards greater attention to be paid on the impact, negative impact of social media usage on this vulnerable age group. So all data points are pointing out to this important reality that we need to focus on this.
Now, sir, just like ma'am mentioned this analogy, social media is like fire. Now, like every new emerging scientific technology, this is also a double-edged sword. Now we discuss the negatives. So what are the positives? How can children or adolescents make the most of it?
So again, rather than rejecting technology, our understanding should include the ways in which we can make technologies beneficial for this growing age population. So one, its impact in terms of learning has been studied. So in a NCERT meta-analysis, a 7-point mean average increase was seen in terms of improvement in vocabulary, English language vocabulary, when children under supervised condition used vocabulary enhancing educational reels or social media products. So that is the case. Second area where such improvement can be seen is in terms of improving civic engagement. So if the purpose is well defined, if there is guidance, it would also improve civic engagement, because that can be the starting point of creating awareness about civic issues or issues around us. So these are two areas that I can broadly flag at. Maybe Geetika can add something more to it.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like to add to what sir said?
Yeah, so in addition to what sir said, like he said, there is a sense of community support, which is currently missing in the urban generation, particularly with the nuclear family setup. So that community support, peer support network can be established through social media. And apart from that, of course, there are many learning outcomes, like sir has mentioned, that students and other young teenagers can experience. And there is a book by this author Pete Etchell, and in his book he mentions the fact that rather than contemplating a straight ban, for example, like sir mentioned about Australia, and the state of Florida has also put a ban on teenagers less than 14 years of age not using social media. So he says that rather than thinking about a complete blanket ban, we should be considering the question whether allowing social media or not is not the real question. The real question is, why is it that some students are thriving with social media and some are struggling? And that is the gap that we need to bridge in order to fully maximize what social media has to offer.
So, as you and ma'am both mentioned, that we cannot completely shut it down, social media, because it is as advantages as disadvantages. So, can we come up with regulations, especially in the Indian context, which can actually regulate? Can we come up with laws which can regulate social media in a manner that less harm is done to adolescents and they can benefit more?
Certainly, that is an approach that is advocated by most. And you see, the peril of banning something is visible in what is happening in Nepal right now. We see Gen Zers are protesting, because the access to social media, because of government regulation, has been affected, and also they're protesting against what they perceive as corruption in their own society. So banning something can also have extreme impact, and that's where we see world over there is a move towards regulating and understanding different aspects of it. So as I mentioned earlier, one aspect of it which needs to be regulated is looking at the minimum age limitations as far as having social media accounts is concerned. So in this context, we have the Australian example, but in the Indian case also, we have the example of the DPDP Act, Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. Section 9 of it pertains to data of children, and children are defined as individuals below age 18. So there is an outright ban, so to say, prohibition on certain usage of data related with children. Tracking of children behavior or targeting children behavior for the purpose of advertisement, etc., is banned, right? So what is required is we need to come up with mechanisms to ensure that this kind of curtailment is tracked, enforced properly. Secondly, we have, for example, the provisions in our IT rules, whereby any such content which pertains to sexual abuse of children has to be removed within 24 hours. Any illegal content which is flagged has to be removed within 72 hours. And failing to do so would mean that the platform may lose the safe haven protection and also fine. Similarly, we are talking about Digital India Act. Now, in this Digital India Act, we can come up with a new technology legal framework dealing with these kinds of issues, whereby one thing is very clear, that the corporations or the platforms which are larger players need to ensure that the protection of vulnerable section is their priority, as is profit. So protection of vulnerable section should also be their priority. Onus should be on them. The focus should be on the platform design, elements such as engagement loop, elements such as any nudge or targeted advertising, which is something which has already happened in the case of European Union. Similarly, you will see this age restriction is something that has been taken up in countries like Belgium, France, etc. Now, there is another interesting case. I had mentioned Adolescents as the series, which is based in UK. Now, in UK, what started was a WhatsApp group, childhood free of smartphones. Now, that a particular initiative has spread across the world, including having a chapter in India. So, we must also encourage the participation of, apart from regulatory authorities, the individuals, families, heads of families, or responsible adults to contribute towards guiding the young adults into the right usage of digital tools, and also reporting, flagging, and preventing the ill impacts of any content on digital media. These are some of the things that can be done or thought about.
Now, ma'am, before we conclude the session, one final question for you. What are the best social educational practices that India can actually draw from? Any global practice that you can lay emphasis upon?
So, Chiranjeev, like you rightly said, social media is definitely impacting the children. In fact, some of the renowned psychologists like Jonathan Haidt has gone on to say that it is rewiring the structure or the brains of the children, and which is why it is extremely important that we take steps very quickly and integrate them with what is already there in the Indian laws. So, for example, we can have content or we can have courses within our curriculum which teach the children about online safety, how to safely access social media, what are the do's and don'ts. Those are some of the best practices that can be done, and a case in point is Estonia, which has already done that. And in addition to that, we can also tell our children about a little bit about parental supervision that has to be there, constant monitoring. The platforms themselves, like Sir has mentioned, they also have a responsibility towards this. So maybe they can introduce some sort of, mental breaks within the app. So, for example, if someone has been scrolling for too long, they can, just put in a break or a breather in between, so that the person realizes that one has been, scrolling or doom scrolling for way too long. So, these are some of the steps that can be taken by social media platforms as well as Indian law agencies to ensure that the regulation is not just coming from top down, not just the government, but also awareness from people within. That understanding has to be there.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, sir. So, dear viewers, we hope you enjoyed the session. We discussed thoroughly how social media impacts the teenagers, not just here in India, but across the world, and what are the various global practices that are already there, that are already taking place, and from which India can take a leaf out of. You can also share your views on this particular issue. We'll keep coming up with more of such interesting issues. Till then, wish you all the very best.